Good day, everybody. Mr. McVeigh. What I have for you today is we're going to find the slope and y-intercept of linear equations. Remember, linear has the word line in it. Remember that? That means a linear equation, when you graph it, it makes a straight line. So, for instance, on our coordinate system, on our coordinate plane, we would have a straight line, and that's a linear. Any equation that represents this line is a linear equation. Also recall that it takes 2 points to define any one particular line. Okay, that's important when we're finding the slope and the y-intercept in just a few minutes. Equations that you should know, and you've been exposed to already, is the point slope form of the equation. Y minus y1 equals the slope, which is m, times x minus x1. You also need to know the slope equation, which is a different form of the point slope equation. The slope is, m is the slope, if you recall, and it's y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And you recall, x and y are the coordinate pairs of a point. So we would have one point, which would be x1 and y1, and another point, x2 and y2, and that's 2 points, point 1 and point 2. And remember that I just said, and you recall, it takes 2 points to make a line. So this would be like point 1. This would be like point 2. Point 2. Now there's many more points on this line, but it takes 2 points to make any particular one line. We also need to know the standard form of the equation. The standard form is y equals m, which is the slope, x plus b, and b, if you recall here, is the y, b is the y-intercept. Okay. And I also want you to recall that the slope, remember the slope, we've already gave you an equation for it here, slope equation, but the slope is also the rise over the run between any 2 points on the line. So rise over run is like, if you remember, is like up and down. That's the y's over left and right. So remember, x's are left and right. These are the x's. These are the y's. Y's are up and down. Okay. So point slope form, the slope, the standard form of the equation, m is the slope, b is the y-intercept. Okay. We're going to do about 4 examples of finding the slope and the y-intercept. One from a graph, one from a coordinate pair, one from the standard form of the equation, and then one when you're given a table. Okay. So thing you need to remember is y-intercept. Right now, y-intercept is where the line crosses the y-axis. And in that case, when it crosses the y-axis, x is always equal to 0. That's true every time. Wherever x equals y is 0, there you're going to find the y-intercept. So you notice from my little example up here, here's the origin at 0. The y-intercept is right above it, or it could be below it if the line is below the x-axis. Okay. So for our first example, let's look at this graph. We're going to be using a graph, and we're going to find the slope and y-intercept using this graph. Now, there's two ways you can find this slope. One is an easy way. If these points aren't too far apart and you can count them real easy, then what I like to do is just go through each point, make me a quick vertical line, make me a grid on each one of these, and then I can just count. I can count how far up it went. So starting here, it went up 1, 2, 3. It went up 3 units. Now, always be careful and check your units. These are counting by 1. They might count by 2s, 20s, or any such linear combination. Okay. But it went up 3, and it went over 1, 2, 2. So we remember that our slope, m, equals the rise over the run, and that's equal to, it went up 3, up and down 3, and it went left and right 2. That should be a 2. Okay. Now, something I always want you to remember, and I teach my students this all the time, is the slope dude. Slope dude. D-U-D-E, dude. Slope dude. He's a face, and your slope is either positive, negative, undefined, straight up and down, or horizontal is 0. It makes a face. See, positive from left increasing to the right, negative decreasing to the right, horizontal is 0, U for undefined. So straight up and down, a line straight up and down is undefined. It's always an easy way to check if your slope is positive or negative. In this case, I see that my line is going uphill to the right, and I look at my slope dude and I see that, well, uphill to the right is positive. So I know my slope is positive. So this is positive here. Okay, it went up and to the right. So up and to the right is positive also. Okay. Now my y-intercept is where x equals 0. So my y-intercept is B, is where it's where x equals 0. So here's my origin. So x equals 0. Where does it cross the y-axis? Here's my line crossing the y-axis. It's crossing at -1. So my y-intercept is -1. And if I want to write the new equation, in slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b, then I know what my slope is already. So my equation is going to be y equals 3/2 times our x. Remember, that's a product. The slope is always connected to the f. It's the coefficient of the f, plus, in this case, my slope is -1, so it's going to be -1. And so here's my equation. Here's my slope. And here's my y-intercept. And we finished that problem. Just as simple as that when you're finding slope and y-intercept from a graph. Now let's go to the next example. This time, I want to use a set of coordinate pairs. Okay? We have 2 points, 2 coordinate pairs, and we need to choose one is 0.1 and one is 0.2. So I'm just going to choose this one as 0.1, and this one is 0.2. And then I know I have, this is x. X comes first, alphabetically, x and then y. So this is going to be 0.1, so it's x1 and y1. And on 0.2 here, this is going to be x2 and y2. Okay. Now I'm going to use I need to find the slope, so I'm going to use my slope formula. Slope, y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. Okay. So here's my x1, my y1, my x2, and y2. So y2 is 14 minus y1 is 10. My x2 is negative 7. And my x1 is 8. So that's minus 8. And my slope is equal to 14 minus 10 is 4. And negative 7 minus 8 is negative 15. So my slope equals negative 4 over 15. And it will not reduce. So this is as simple as I can make my slope. Now, if I would like to find the y-intercept, I need to use my point slope formula of y minus y1 equals my slope times x minus x1. I can pick either one of these points. I need an x1 and y1, so this is what I chose as point 1, so I'm just going to continue with it, x1 and y1. I'm going to substitute those in, so I have y minus 10 equals my slope is negative 4 over 15, and then times x minus, and my x1 was 8. Then if I want to put this in standard form, then I can distribute. So that would leave me with y equals negative 10. Y equals, one more time, y minus 10 equals negative 4 15s times x minus negative 4 15 times 8. So let's see, 8 times 4 is 32 divided by 15, so that's y minus 10 equals negative 4 over 15 plus 32 over 15. And that won't reduce. So now I need to add up 10 to both sides, plus 10, plus 10. And that gives me y equals negative 4 15s x plus 32 over 15 plus 10, 32 over 15 plus 10, and I'll just make that a decimal, is 12. That's plus 12.13, and it's a repeat. And so here's my equation. Here's my equation in standard form. Here's my slope. And now I need to find my y-intercept. So my y-intercept here is where x equals 0. So I know that this is my standard equation. This is m, x plus b. So I know my y-intercept equals 12.13, repeat, or b equals 12.13. Okay, so there's my y-intercept. Here's my slope, and here's my equation in standard form. Example number 3. We always like these because this is already in standard form. So all we have to do is remember standard form is y equals the slope times x plus b. And so what's my slope? M equals, in this case, it's 1/4. And my y-intercept b is right here. So it's 1. And we are done. Simple as that. I always like these because they're simple. Okay. The last, I'm just going to find the slope and y-intercept on this, but the last equation here, sometimes you'll get a table. Well, remember, we can use, just like we did on the example 2, where we had 2 points and we found it with 2 points. That's all we have to do here is we have to pick 2 points. It doesn't matter which 2 you pick. You can pick any 2 points, the first one and the last, or 2 together. It doesn't matter. So I'm going to pick these 2 points, this one and this one, because I like multiplying and adding 0 and 1. It's easy. Anything times 0 is 0. Okay, so I'm going to call this point 1. This one point 2. And so my slope, using the slope equation, is y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. And that's going to be, these are my y's, these are my x's, so this is 0.2, so it's going to be 4 minus 1 over 2 minus 0, and that's equal to 3 over 2. Oops, that should be a 2. 2. And there's my slope. Now my y-intercept is easy. Remember, y-intercept is where x equals 0. So we come along here, we're looking there. There it is. There's x equals 0. So my y-intercept, when x equals 0, b, my y-intercept is equal to 1. And we are done. If you like this video and would like to see more, then please subscribe. As always, have a good day. Mr. McVeigh.